I'm really excited to welcome everyone this morning to our webinar. I'm Skelcher, Client Success Manager for Canada here at Thoughtexchange. Some context for those of you who don't know me. I happily began my time with Thoughtexchange 4 years ago, after a 30-year career in education. So really excited to be able to dig into conversations like we are today with Jayson. Before I get started, I want to let you know that if you want to join the conversation on LinkedIn or Twitter, you may do so using the hashtag TEVE or TE Virtual Events right here. But I'm going to take you back now to Jayson. So as you know, our focus today is on student voice and why it matters. And here to explore the topic with me is Jayson Lovell from Wolf Creek Public Schools in Wolf Creek, Alberta. Or Ponoka, Alberta, actually, isn't it, Jayson?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for being here to share your experience and perspectives with us, Jayson. And after spending a couple of days with you in Wolf Creek Public Schools, I know that your bio only scratches the surface of who you are and what you're up to there. And it was a real inspiration for me to watch you with your community and to see firsthand the passion you have for education, the connection you have with your staff and students. And I just want to invite you to add anything else to this bio that you might want to include.
Sure, thanks for that, Anne, and good morning, everyone. I guess morning here in Alberta. I know we have folks from all over the place. Yeah, I want to start by thanking Anne and the team at Thoughtexchange for this opportunity. Our journey, I think, is one of interest for sure. I think we've had a great experience here over the course of a number of years with the whole topic of Thoughtexchange working very closely with us to really enhance the work that we're doing. So just to go back a little bit to my journey, I started in Wolf Creek Public Schools 26 years ago, started as a grade 6 teacher, and very quickly moved into an administrative role at 28 years old. I was a young administrator, not recommended, by the way, to jump in that early, but an opportunity came up and I did. So I've been in leadership for many, many years, moving through our school system in different roles, and was fortunate enough 3 years ago to move into this role as superintendent of schools. So as an educator, it's been a life's work. Focusing on ensuring that I'm serving our students and our staff and our communities at the highest level. And it's just an honor to have some time to share our journey.
Thanks, Jayson. So I just want to stop sharing here. So stop that and let's move to us for a moment. And I wanted to give people even more of a context about you and get to know you in a little bit of a more well-rounded way. So we've got sort of 5-star questions for our 5-star leaders, is how we often like to get started. So my first one for you is around, what's your favorite place to travel to?
Well, Canadian winters are extremely harsh, so we look for any opportunity to maybe get some relief. So we like to actually travel to Palm Springs. We tend to go down at least once or twice a year and get some sunshine and enjoy the weather, and golf as well. I'm an avid golfer. Our golf season's only 6 months here. As a matter of fact, our course just opened on Friday. I had a chance to get out, and of course the Masters was on this weekend, so it was a very good golf weekend for me. But definitely Palm Springs is our spot in the States.
That's great. Yeah, nice to be warm, especially after a long winter like
yes.
This one. How about your favorite item in your wardrobe? Ties or shirts or socks? I've noticed those on you.
Yeah. My daughter, I have a 10-year-old daughter who likes buying her dad socks with all kinds of weird and funky things on them. So I would have to say socks. I have socks with cats on them. I have socks with aliens on them. As a matter of fact, my board often asks to see my socks because they're a bit of a conversation piece.
Hey,
socks.
We'll have to get you some Thoughtexchange socks then.
Maybe, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
When I come back. In-person meetings or virtual meetings for you?
For me, in person, I think is just a better fit. I enjoy seeing people face to face, and that dialogue and interaction is always a great part of my role in education. So yeah, face-to-face. Yeah.
Social media like Twitter or Instagram?
I have to confess, my social media footprint is not very large personally. We do a lot of work in the school division with a variety of social media platforms, but I tend to be a little anonymous out there, to be honest. And I don't know if it's just a sign of my generation, but I certainly value it. But I just, quite frankly, don't spend a lot of time on it. So yeah, not too much there to offer, Anne. Sorry.
No worries. I'm the same. And I think this is my favorite question, is around what is your favorite thing around Wolf, or favorite thing about Wolf Creek Public Schools?
Yeah, great question. You know, for me, it's really about the culture of our school division, which is ultimately about the people. I've been fortunate, as I said, over my years in Wolf Creek to make many connections. I know our staff well. I know the dynamics in our communities well. I would say just that ability to work with our stakeholders to ultimately do what's best for our students and create success for all learners, which is our school division motto. So I think for me, it's just about the people, it's about community, it's about the culture, the great things that we celebrate that make this body of work special.
You know, I have to say, it's like when we walk into a school, we often sense the culture the minute we walk in the door. And that was my experience walking into your school division office and working with your people. You could feel that warm, rich culture from the get-go.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's very important to us.
So now that we've learned a little bit more about you, can you share with us the history of Student Voice, how you've worked with Student Voice in your division?
Sure. So it started with our board of trustees. Back in 2015, our board decided to really formalize a student voice initiative or approach, understanding provincially a number of important groups really were promoting that, most notably the Alberta School Boards Association, Public School Boards Association. So there were some really strong voices encouraging and compelling school boards to do work in this area. So in 2015, our board decided to create a student voice focus and actually created 4 important outcomes that they wanted from student voice. And I'll just share those. Mm-hmm. The first one was trustees will make informed decisions when using input and ideas learned from the student voice process. Number 2, trustees will have an understanding of students' experiences and needs in Wolf Creek Public Schools. Number 3, trustees will have information to share with partners to enhance the learning of students. And number 4, and I think from my perspective, one of the most important outcomes is to validate students' voices. So there really was a shared belief by the board and senior leadership that we need to take the time to listen to our students and to understand their perspective, their journey in our school system, initiatives, programs, challenges, all of that. So our board really, I feel, in kicking off that initiative, really felt that they needed to bring students together. So one of their first opportunities was to facilitate a face-to-face session here in our office that occurred in 2015. And there was a one-day session where students came in from mostly our junior high and high schools. It was a smaller group of students, around 25. And they had a facilitated day where a number of questions were asked and information was gathered. And there were some important takeaways from that meeting, in that our board of trustees valued the time that they spent interacting with students. Because as much as trustees want to be in schools and be connected, their role is really challenging in terms of that opportunity. And so they liked it. But they also recognized and felt that the information that they received maybe wasn't representative of all students. It was a small sample of students. So they really felt that we needed to expand and broaden that set of information to really have a better understanding. And so when I came on as superintendent 3 years ago, part of the conversation and part of the focus moving forward was to expand and try to find different ways to gather those voices from our students. And so at that particular time, I did an assessment of what's available, what options do we have, and came to Thoughtexchange as one option, brought that forward to the board. We signed on with Thoughtexchange, and we're 3 years in. And so really that was the starting point of then elevating and moving our school division into a different place to really gather those voices and then use those voices to guide the vision and the direction in a number of key areas in Wolf Creek Public Schools.
There's so much to dig into around that, for sure. And so now that you've got this expansion piece, what kind of participation are you getting that sense, and are the trustees getting that sense that you're hearing from that representative voice of your students?
Sure. The short answer is yes to that. We've done 2 student voice exchanges over the past 3 years. The first one, we had 734 students participate from grades 9 and 12. So we focus specifically on 2 grades. And the reason for that is the way our school system is set up is that typically our students are in a school until grade 9, and then we have high school transition into high school. So we felt grade 9 is a good year because they've had experience probably in one school, if not maybe 2 schools, K to 6, for example, then a junior high, or a K to 4 and then a middle school. And so we felt that that was a good time. And of course, at the end of grade 12, at the end of their journey, their formal journey with us, is a really good time to gather their thoughts. So we actually had 63% of our grade 9 students participate that first exchange, and then 37% of our grade 12s. And that was certainly surprising with the vast volume of thoughts and information that we gleaned from that first process. And we've also just wrapped up a second process of an exchange where we asked a different question, but we also were able to gather the thoughts and perspectives of another large number of students within our school division. So we just wrapped up that process about a month ago, roughly, maybe 6 weeks now. Mm-hmm. And we were able to hear from, and this one, by the way, was just high school students, grades 10, 11, and 12. And we had 687 high school students respond, which is roughly 37% of our high school population in Wolf Creek Public Schools. So once again, a really strong level of engagement. And with the Thoughtexchange engagements, both engagements, I would say the depth of thought and the clarity of thought from our students surprised me, in that they took the time to actually share. And it wasn't just superficial. I think that students went to a place of really valuing the opportunity, understanding that it was the first time we've asked them. Outside of that group of 25 students that came in for face-to-face, it was their first opportunity. So they had a lot to say, a lot to share. And it was the same in this most recent exchange. Our students really took it seriously and gave us a lot.
And I'm hearing the benefit back to them as well, in terms of their feeling validated, which was one of your 4, huh?
You know, absolutely. And one of the really important pieces from the first exchange that our board of trustees weighed in on and felt was extremely important was not just asking for their thoughts and their opinion and their perspective, but also putting forward actions and concrete plans that demonstrated that we not only asked the questions and we listened, but we've actually done something about it. And I would say that was probably the strongest outcome from that first exchange. Now, understanding the second exchange is different in that the first exchange was really about highlighting their experience, what was working for them over the years in our system, and what did we need to consider to improve on. What was it that could have been different for them, really was part of that. This most recent exchange was a focus on also sharing their experience, but the context is to guide us in refreshing our district mission, vision, values, and beliefs. So there's a different purpose, but at the same time, we also asked them questions that were very relevant to their experience. And so they shared openly. I mean, the one thing I've learned over my years as an educator is that if you give students a venue or a pathway to share, and they believe that perspective and that voice will be honored, then they will for the most part take advantage of it. And certainly that's been our experience with our 2 exchanges here.
And I just wanted, just before we move on to, I just wanted to move on to your description of the Student Voice Day that we did February 11th. I wanted just to get a sense from you of when you're talking about the importance of closing the loop and demonstrating to students that you not only listen, but you're doing something with it. Do you have a sense that that is understood by students now and taken for granted in that it's going to be happening in Wolf Creek? Is it your fabric?
I believe there's a legacy from the first exchange that we've communicated very, very well that would help our students understand that we are prepared to listen and take action. And I would go to the communication that we shared after the first exchange, because we did a lot on the promotion and trying to entice and encourage students to be a part of it. One thing that I did create as a pathway to encouraging students is we did a brief video. We had a very skilled and capable technician in our tech department who also dabbled a lot in creating video, high quality video. So I did a very short vlog, which I had never done before. It was a bit theatrical, a little whimsical, and I would say it was just very different than what you would typically see from a superintendent. It was lighthearted, and I think it was designed to really demonstrate to them that that we're interested in hearing from them. So after we concluded the thought exchange, what was also important was to create another video that had me thanking them, and also had one of our trustees thanking them, but also sharing a very strong commitment to them. And that commitment was, we asked, we listened, and we are going to do something with what you've shared with us to help improve your experience in our school system or other students as they work through our school system. So we have done that, and we have also communicated a number of things that we have improved. And I think, for example, those students that shared with us in grade 9, now that they are in grade 12 and have participated, there's an awareness that we actually did something with what they told us in grade 9. And that is essential for students to have confidence and faith, and to jump in and say, I'm going to invest my time to participate because I know there's actually someone listening to this and they care about what I say and they value it and they're willing to act on it. And I mean, I can share, if you'd like, Anne, just a few of the things that we did from that last exchange that really have made a difference in our school division.
Sure, let's do that, and then we'll do a brief description for everybody about our day together.
Yeah, for sure.
Those pieces are so important.
Yeah, so so our students, going back to the first exchange, our grade 9 students, they were very focused on option classes, ways that we could expand their experience and offerings, understanding we're a rural school division, and we have challenges around small schools offering a variety of courses. And we do very, very well with the courses that we offer, but they asked for more. They also talked to us about facilities and maintenance. Things like, updating equipment, investing in their school as far as just new furnishings, and trying to create a more inviting and I think suitable space. So what we did is we did restore some programs and invest in a number of programs. Once again, the board made these decisions after this information came to them as part of their budget deliberations around this time in the spring of that year. So for example, we restored a school band and choral music program in a junior high program that had been mothballed many, many years earlier. And there was a significant investment to purchase new instruments and repair instruments and get that program off the ground. We also restored another program in one of our small rural schools to send students for some trades-based programming, some option programming. We also established another program, very innovative, where our students can participate on rig training. We're an oil and gas province, and we became aware of a program being offered in another school division where students could actually go to a working rig and experience that and receive training and credentials in that area. So those are just three. Another big one, though, that I would share is our students also talked about experiences outside of the classroom, but also experiences outside of this province. So experiencing other cultures, experiencing other languages. And so we created an international learning program with a direct memorandum of understanding in Guangzhou, China. So we've entered into that agreement going back about a year, And it's created a pathway for students from China to be part of our school division on exchanges. We've also had students participate in exchanges. Most recently in March, we had a group of 24 students spend about 11 days in Guangzhou, China. So once again, these are all directions that really came from our students and were strong voices at the board table when our trustees were making decisions about investing in programs and opportunities for the future. So those are, and I have other examples, but I would just say those were some of the significant changes that happened from that first exchange.
That's great. So I just want to move briefly before we open the Thought Exchange up to our day together with your students. It was so very exciting for me, and I was amazed at the vulnerability that they shared, the courageous way they participated, the thoughtfulness with which they participated. But can you give us a brief description of that day and maybe some highlights that were there for you?
Sure. Yeah, it was an amazing day, and I think part of the reason that it was so successful was selection of students. And you have to be very strategic, I believe, and very purposeful in how you select the students that you want to be a part of it. And it's not that you want the same profile of student, you want diversity in the group. But one of the key characteristics that we asked for to our principals to nominate students was really students that are willing to share their opinion. So in other words, opinion leaders in that student body within that school. And they did an outstanding job of putting forward the names of students who they knew would be outspoken, would be honest, would be willing to share, and came from a variety of background and experience. So we didn't just have a room full of academic students or students that were very focused on sports or specific programs. It was kind of a diverse and broad set of students. And I think that's really important. And I think looking at that day, for me as a superintendent, and I know, and we talked about this in setting up that day, is I really felt that that it was important that I be there as a participant and not be there as a facilitator. So I appreciated the plan that we put together with you and Kaylee facilitating, because it allowed me to be in a different place and our trustees to be in a different place, to be part of it, to just take the time to sit with our students and to listen to them and to watch them engage and to be vulnerable, as you said, and to be open and honest. And they were. And I think the information that came to us that day really did inform the work that we're doing in this particular exchange as far as what do we represent as a school division, as far as our overarching mission, our vision, our values, our beliefs. And they told us that from their perspective in a way where we understand that much more clearly now because of that day. Because we did some, I thought, some really interesting exercises, and I'll just share a few. The one activity that really stands out for me was the I wish it had been different activity. And I think that's an important question to ask students, because what it did was really take them to a place of saying, you know, these things in Wolf Creek Public Schools are important to me. I value them. I've been able to grow as a learner and as a person, but also I wished these other things would have been different for me, because there were times when I needed this or this or this, and they were very specific in what those were. And I think that was important for sure for us to hear. The other one was the graduate of the future. And on the other side of that exercise of looking back in the rearview mirror was looking at the hood ornament or looking down the road. And so we asked them, you know, can you describe what you think a graduate of the future should have in terms of qualities and opportunities? And it was framed around the head, the heart, and the hands. And the head and the heart and the hands really represented with the head. What are the academic skills or the cognitive experiences that really build their academic skill set? And then the heart was, you know, more about citizenship and what it meant to be a student who could leave our school system and be a contributing and positive member to our communities and to society. And then we talked about hands-on activities and experiences that really created a well-rounded experience. And so they did an amazing job of that and put stickers with sticky notes with different thoughts on different parts of cutouts that we had of actual students. And I think that was a tremendously powerful opportunity. And once again, just so insightful because they understand what life is like as a student these days and what they are challenged by and what they value. And they were able to share that with us.
That's great. You know, I aligned some of those pieces. They had heart and hands pieces from the students with what the parents and trustees and staff did the next day, as well as with the Alberta curriculum. And the students could have fully informed both of those. They're so closely aligned. So that's great to see. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was surprising that they were that aligned. And yet, you know, when we talk about what students value, you know, it does come back to relationships. I mean, that was the number one comment that was shared. They reflected on times where they really needed guidance and support and the strength of the people in our schools that really wrap around them and provide that. And there were lots of stories and testimonials that they shared, and not necessarily always teachers. You know, there were stories about bus drivers. There were stories about secretaries. There were stories about custodians and people who you would never necessarily think of as far as having that level of impact, but it just validated and it reinforced that we're a team in Wolf Creek and that all of us play such an important role in supporting our kids day in and day out. And we can't undervalue or underestimate the importance of that.
Thank you, Jayson. We're going to open an exchange now and see what questions, because I'm sure people are dying to ask questions of you and what you've shared already. So Amelia's going to open up an exchange. In fact, she's got the exchange posted in the chat window for those of you participating. So remember, when you go into that exchange, that you don't have to sign up. When prompted, you just need to accept the terms of use and then click on the continue button. So the question in the exchange is, what are the most important thoughts or questions you have for Jayson and Anne regarding the student voice discussion? So in order for you to be able to participate in that exchange, and we'll get that link up as well, we're going to be a little bit quiet now, Jayson and I, and give you some time to participate. So I feel odd to be sitting in a webinar in silence, but it will allow you to participate in the exchange. And let's dig into some of those thoughts. Jayson, I'm going to start with that first one, where the student voice answers shared openly, social media, website, or other platforms. Can you respond to that for us?
Sure. So yes, we posted all of the results because this exchange was student voice. So we asked students, we also asked our staff, and we also asked parents and community members. So we had 3 data sets, which once we wrapped up the exchange, you could go in and filter the different thoughts. But yes, we did post the thoughts openly. Once again, I think that's an absolutely pivotal outcome of this, is that once you ask and gather, you need to share. So we have. We also have on social media directed people to our website. So it's all housed on our website. Everything is there. We also have posted it to our administrators. So we have monthly administrator meetings. We shared the information with them. We put a presentation together actually at our level and shared that out so that our administrators, school-based administrators, can share that with their staff and with their school councils and a variety of audiences. So yeah, we've very much communicated the results.
Mm-hmm. And did you, I mean, I know people are aware, most people are aware that the responses in the exchange itself are confidential. People, we do our best to have non-identifiers even through demographic questions. Some of the responses of students in your exchange and during that day, I think the power of sharing that out, and I think you have done that amongst, as you said, amongst the trustees and the principals, et cetera, been really insightful for them to receive, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And going to our meeting coming up on April 30th, that's when we'll spend a whole day. So our trustees, our senior team, we'll have a steering committee that was involved in that first meeting on February 12th. And then of course our students. So together we will go into much more in-depth analysis and review of those comments and what they represent. And definitely, there's, and I understand that question around vulnerability. I think that's the point that would be important to recognize, is that sometimes it's a little uncomfortable to ask the questions that we've asked, because quite simply, we have at times students reflecting, or staff or community reflecting on situations that are sometimes very delicate and sometimes very emotional and hard hitting. And so you have to be prepared for that. And I think we were, but we also want honesty. And that's always the balancing act, is that, you have to be prepared to listen to not only the comments that are really glowing and really positive and really worth celebrating, but you also have to be prepared to listen on the other side and understand that they're coming from a place of being trusting, that they can share openly, and that we will appropriately, certainly share those comments and understand them. And of course, in setting up the Thought Exchange, we also recognize through the monitoring and just the way it's done is, if comments are hurtful or inappropriate or directed towards an individual staff member or person to identify, we do moderate that so that that's not included in the feedback, and that's important as well.
Great. I really want to hear your response to this next question. How did the student community react to this? And by the way, we had more people offering more thoughts, so really excited.
Yeah. Well, it just so happens, timing is everything, they say. And we had a string of extremely cold weather during the Thought Exchange, in which we had school closure, so snow days, and some days that were on the edge of potentially being a school closure day, but I made the decision not to close. And there was a lot of reaction from the students. They took the opportunity to give feedback on that. So, there were some comments that were fairly contemporary around what was going on. But I do believe that the students, I think that when they look at the feedback and they review it, I think the starring process really does elevate the thoughts that are important to them. And they actually sent us a lot of feedback on, I'll just share two pieces. One is our school calendar. Calendar always seems to be a topic of discussion and a topic of interest right across the board, students, staff, parents, and our students gave a lot of feedback on our calendar, because we have a calendar that actually creates every second Friday as non-student days, and staff are there, but we don't have students there. And there was a lot of feedback and reflecting on that. And so, I think the student community and their reaction would be one of, that one is really important for the board and for senior leadership to understand. The other one was our school our school division for high school students offers a program called Rock the Diploma, where students receive a diploma prep weekend that's covered by the board. They support it. We actually have a 17-hour intensive opportunity for them to prepare. And they gave a tremendous amount of feedback as well. So I think they felt, for the most part, that they had their say, that they communicated what they needed to communicate. And I think the reaction from the students might be just right now wondering what's going to happen with that feedback, and closing the loop, getting back to them, honoring them in a way where they know that they've been heard and that we're acting on it in ways that we can and that we need to.
One of my favorite thoughts in your exchange, your recent exchange, was the comment, allowing students more freedom to make mistakes and learn from them. I thought that was hugely insightful. And another one is, I believe Wolf Creek Public Schools should diversify its education system to prepare people for the future with different talents.
Yeah.
And that's so much of the work that you have been doing in the options and the other work that you've been working with.
For sure. And one of the comments that really resonated with me, if I can just reflect on, as you are, Anne, some of the specific themes and comments, there were a lot of comments from students and parents about ensuring that students are prepared for, I would call it Life 101, is how I would categorize it. It's being able to do your taxes, being able to manage your finances, being able to navigate through just kind of the day-to-day goings on in a life outside of high school. And we do have programs within high school that address those areas, but they want more of that. And I think it's because they understand that life is complex. It's challenging. It's not easy when you leave high school and you leave the comforts of your home and mom and dad, supporting you and looking after your needs. And so there was a fairly strong push about that. And it's interesting because as much as we are obviously very focused on meeting the curricular outcomes of the program of studies from our government, they kind of are saying that's great, but we want more in other areas. So we're going to have to really reflect on that. I wouldn't call it a back to basics focus, but I would say it's really analyzing the time and the space that we have with our students and how we maybe need to think a little differently about preparing them for life outside of high school. So that was one really interesting piece for me personally.
I'm dying to get to the next question too. What is the single most important question we could ask our high school students?
Yeah.
I think this is a little bit tied to what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a great question. From my perspective, I go back to that rear view mirror, hood ornament analogy. There's value in both. I tend to lean a little bit more towards, I guess, the rear view mirror because they can reflect back on many, many years and many experiences. So the question that we asked, one of the questions that we asked in the face-to-face was, what is the most valuable contribution? The most valuable. And I think that's important to really narrow it down and define it in those terms that we've made. So sorry, I'll just go back and read the question. What is the most valuable contribution Wolf Creek Public Schools has made to you as a learner and or in your life? So I think that question is a great question because I think it will provide students to reflect in a variety of ways. It's fairly open-ended. And I think that's the other part that's important is to recognize that you don't want the question to be so narrow and so precise that it limits the feedback. I've come to realize that. So I think that question would be probably the most important to really understand where your students are coming from.
And then that looking back piece, I'm just looking at this thought down here just before I can't believe that time's gone so fast. But this one about somebody asking to hear a little more about that, wish it had been different activity, and hit me in the gut and feels like an incredibly vulnerable thing to ask. And how was it received and how did you discuss it after? And I remember when we were planning that day, we were a little bit concerned about that question. And yet for me, as you've already reflected, it was probably the most powerful part of the day. And I'll never forget the faces and the intensity and the desire with which those students wanted to respond to that question. And I think we phrased it as, wish it had been different for you or somebody you know. So some students talked about somebody they knew, and then others talked about that grade 3 student who understood that his teacher was saying to him that he wouldn't amount to much, and how he set that down. And there were tears in his eyes, but he said, I'm glad that was said to me because I set that down as a target for my life. And boy, he's just flourishing now. So
yeah,
we want that to happen, but he wished it had been done in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there were other stories told around assessment practices or situations like going to assessment practices. For example, it's how teachers assess them and provide feedback, and how the classroom is meeting their needs in terms of advancing their learning and giving them opportunities to grow as a learner. And I know in our high schools, it's an ongoing conversation around the focus on ensuring that summative assessments, end of unit assessments, for example, or end of year assessments really are designed to, of course, gauge the students' learning and to what degree they've learned the content. But also at the same time, it's about formative assessment and ways that our teachers are working with students to help them as a learner to fill in those gaps of understanding. And there were lots of comments and stories around that as well. And so that was one area that stood out, as there were lots of assessment kind of related, but also I remember one student in particular talking about a death in their family of their grandfather, and just the social worker in their school and how that social worker helped them through that experience. And we're very fortunate in our school division. We have a social worker working in every school in our school division. It's highly valued and it's extremely important. And it, once again, validates that level of support and what we provide to our students to ensure that when they're in a situation like that, where they're mourning the loss of a loved one, that we have the support in our schools to get them through that and to help them. Mm-hmm. So once again, those stories were incredibly important for us to hear.
Yeah, and when one of your goals as we began was the focus for the board was really understanding the student experience, both through the thought exchange and in our day. I just love that you've been able to capture those stories in that way so very powerfully. And I could talk on and on and on with you, Jayson, about this and so many other topics, including the formative and summative assessment piece. And unfortunately, our time's wrapping up here. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your experience and showing us how you brought the voices into your school division, into your planning, into your decision making there. And I just know that the students felt fully empowered in that day, and they felt so supported by leadership. And I know that message went out from that day and through the thought exchange to throughout the community.
Thank you for that, Anne. And yeah, I am appreciative of the opportunity to share our story, and absolutely there's lots to share and say, but I hope that what I shared today is of value to other educators and leaders that are looking at using Thought Exchange or just honoring student voice. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here one more time. I want to thank our participants too. I think it's been an amazing opportunity to just begin to delve into some of your questions and your thoughts. And one final thing I want to encourage all our school district leaders to think about is attending our next leadership summit, which is in Chicago, Illinois in July, Jayson. Okay. I'll send that invitation to you. It's a new type of leadership development event that uses our platform, and we're really excited, as have our participants, being exceptionally excited to participate in that. So thank you, Jayson, again, so valuable.
My pleasure.
Time with you. Thanks everyone for joining us, and look forward to seeing you back at our TE virtual events again.